Hi, Biondi.
Hi, Ledy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Despite
So,
everything that happens, the pandemic and everything else,
so it's been
yeah,
like
good.
ages, like maybe since the last time I saw you. Biondi used to be a citizen of Jakarta, and now he's a citizen of West Java. Biondi is a friend
Right.
of mine. He is a very smart person, in my opinion, and very talented young leader. Uh, Biondi now works for the government of West Java, a very important role as well that Biondi and his team is doing for the government and the people of West Java, particularly during this pandemic. Biondi, uh, he is a political scientist by education, but by profession, he's a practitioner in the area that can be described as ICT for development, the use of information and communication technology for development, which is, I think, is a very exciting area. Why did you take up the role with the government of West Java? What made you interested to do it?
Yeah. First of all, it's such an honor. That's a very generous introduction that you gave about me. The reason why I'm interested to take up this role, I think there is a huge sense of urgency for good governance and public services to sort of adapt to all this innovation and digital technology that sort of make a lot of positive accelerative changes out there. And in West Java, they recently have a new governor. We don't need to mention the name. I think people mostly
Yeah.
know who it is. So he has this idea to transform West Java into a digital province
Right.
and wanting to adopt all this innovation that happens out there within the public services, within what the government program, right? Just to give a brief context about West Java in itself, it has almost 50 million people, like 49.3 population. It's the most populous province in Indonesia.
Yeah.
It's equivalent to South Korea, double the size of Australia. Just to give a context, it's even
Yes.
bigger than Singapore and Malaysia's population combined.
The use of data during the pandemic, as we have seen the cases in some countries, or they are considered to be successful in tackling this great challenge by harnessing data analytics, IT. How is West Java stands on that?
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that we are at the forefront of harnessing data and technology for the pandemic management.
Mm.
People remember the first two cases confirmed, the first two COVID-19 cases confirmed in Indonesia were Depok citizens,
Mm.
which by administrative boundary, they are West Java citizens, right?
Yeah.
That was March 2. And by March 2, the governor turned our team, which was generally under normal circumstances, we have our own programs with the command center and stuff like that. But immediately that day, he turns our team, which was the tech team, data team, into a crisis hub
Mm.
because he understands that with such a scale of almost 50 million people, there is no way manual process would be able to help manage the pandemic and deliver the people out of, well, it's still happening as in many other places, but it really helps with the case management, transparency, automation, and how people could be more aware of the current status.
Mm.
And also in just to a certain way, it also helps democratizing the process. I just wanted to explain this one application that we made
Sure.
within a week
Yeah.
of the pandemic happened. So it was March 2, and the next week we sort of launched the application. So it's the idea is to have a super apps for people to know where to go to when they wanted to verify information, because there are a lot of misinformation going around the pandemic as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if they wanted to access certain public services or facilities like testing or self-diagnose or giving donation, be volunteers, whatever services that they wanted to access, they know where to go, right? Because it's only one place to go, and that happens within just 1 week. That shows what we believe in, where we stand. And then this team was already formed before the pandemic happens, right?
Right.
We felt that technology matters a lot, and data transparency is critical for the people to stay informed and to know the latest situation.
Yeah, because there is a debate regarding this topic, right? Using data analytics during this pandemic. If you look into other countries, South Korea and Taiwan, for instance, because there are many write-ups about how they do contact tracing, how they use data, and how they process it, so they can react faster, and then they can contain the spread of the virus, better. But that requires cooperation from the citizen, because there is an aspect of government accessing private data of its citizens, which I think different society may have different idea about what is proper or what is acceptable, the level of access that government has towards its citizen private data. So what do you think about this debate itself?
Right. I think it's very observable. We, especially during the first wave of the COVID-19, and the first wave in itself is also a debatable term because people don't feel like we are done with the first wave anyway before the second wave came. But we see that a lot of countries with a high level of compliance, like public compliance, they can manage it relatively better, right? And then it's not just the level of compliance, but the tools that the government use is also critical, because even when the people are compliant, but there is no tools that the government harness in order to manage the citizens, it's not going to happen, right? So it requires both sides. If you look at Taiwan or South Korea or even Singapore, our neighbor, these are the country with prior experiences managing pandemic. And when that happened, people immediately know that without government telling them that they need to wear mask when they go to public, they need to keep distance, and also they need to use the tools provided by the government so that people can be traced, right? But again, as you mentioned, different country might have different contexts.
Yes.
And if you look at
So I would like to ask you a technical question now, as a citizen and as you as a person who works for the government. So we now have all these platforms, tools. West Java has its own app, as you mentioned, right? Why is it important for people like me and everyone else, to participate and filling those information and be honest when they fill the information? What kind of significance that they can make, if or I can make, by being a good citizen and then comply with government advice, in terms of filling the necessary forms or filling the necessary app.
Right. I think there are two fronts that I think is important to be clarified for people that still feel like they don't need to comply, or they feel like they can do whatever they want and not abiding by the regulation that is currently in place or will be in place. The first one is the fact that such scale or pandemic that currently happens, it really is a matter of people interacting with one another. And with that, information that comes from individual becomes very critical, because our technology still has limit. It's not like it's going to reveal the truth in itself without people participating in giving information, right? Another thing is also because of limit in resources. According to the standard of the World Health Organization, for a country or a province in our case, you need to do testing at least 1% of the population. But test in itself, especially PCR test, is also an expensive tool.
Yes.
You need the PTM, you need the Reagan, you need the Draken, you need the people who perform the test, and then you need to bring it to the lab. which the lab also has to have certain security standards or safety standards, and then you need people performing the extraction and analysis. So it's a massive undertaking and an expensive one. And with our limit and budget, currently we are able to perform almost 200K tests. It sounds like a big number, but it's not even enough. For the past 4 months, we're struggling to collect more resources so that we can buy more tests and perform it to the right people. Now, because we have limited number of resources, when people giving false information that perhaps they feel like they have symptoms or they are in contact with people with symptoms, or they have traveling history to the hotspots, or vice versa, with such lies or misinformation, we might be giving the test to the wrong people, right? Because when you have limited resources, it's very important for us not to waste the bullet and to really give it to the right people so that we can identify the cases quicker. But with people giving false information, it's going to blur the whole situation, and it becomes even more difficult to allocate resources to the place.
But do you think Indonesia right now may be accelerated by this pandemic as well? Let's say in the government sector, there's a chance, possibility, there's a lesson learned from this, and then going forward we will become more interested, we become more focused, we put resources, we do more research in terms of how we can harness ICT even more to help us govern the society. Do you see that opportunity?
Yeah, I think, well, would better be, because there are a lot of programs sacrificed because of the refocusing, managing the pandemic, and I think we've seen it as evident that the government now realize the importance of one data, for example. My biggest hope is that the government really learned the importance of putting a standard into the data collection efforts and using a systemized effort with application, with IT system when collecting this data. Because for a lot of these policies need to be based on accurate data. So it's like garbage in, garbage out. Yeah. So even when you have this understanding of using data, but if the data is not standardized and if it doesn't reflect the reality, you would end up enforcing policies that is not going to work, or even worse, it might lead to a darker place, right?
Yes, it's a great idea to use data for policy making, analytics, information technology, and improve our capacity on that. But in another side of the equation, people worry, or let's say group of citizens will worry about, again, privacy, because all this activity of data gathering, a massive data gathering, if it's the context of the country. And countries may have different laws as well about this. How do we protect personal data in the future?
Right. I think there's this misconception about transparency vis-a-vis privacy. People feel like when they collect their data for the sake of being transparent, for the sake of the government being transparent, it's going to harm their privacy. I don't think it's not always the case. Privacy and transparency are not mutually exclusive. You can still be transparent while respecting individual privacy. We've done that in many cases when we decided to publish the spots where the cases are located. It creates such a huge uproar because people felt now my personal identity where I live is going to be exposed, and then maybe my neighbors would know that I'm a positive confirmed COVID-19 case, and it's going to be like published publicly, right? But what we did is that the aim is that for people to be more aware that their neighborhood is not free from COVID-19. They need to be more vigilant. They need to keep distance. They have to ensure that they are within safe distance from one another. And when they travel, they just need to be more vigilant and be more aware, right? So we randomize. Again, this is the importance of putting an IT in place and not just tabular data being published on the website. So we so we randomly by system we randomize the longitude and latitude of the cases, and we put a disclaimer on the website that this is not the address of the COVID-19 case individual, but we wanted to say that the case exists in your village or in your kelurahan or in your neighborhood, right? So you're being transparent in a way to increase the awareness of that community, of that neighborhood, without necessarily exposing the individual data of that person, without necessarily pinpointing that Miss A is the one that you need to isolate from the neighborhood. So that's what we did. So at least from our point of view, that individual level of data is still respected. Their privacy is still respected. At the same time, we are being transparent about the existence of that case in that community. Another thing that I wanted to emphasize, it's also important for the government to ensure that data security is at its highest standards, because the more people sign up for an application, for example, the more it's going to invite the interest of hackers or people who are mining the data, even at the scale of unicorns, startup unicorns. We've seen an example where their data are being mined and then published elsewhere for some malicious motive. So the government also needs to ensure that safety is at its highest standard, so people would be more comfortable, giving private information.
Yeah. It's very important for us to make a serious investment to guarantee security of our citizens' data. You are involved in a digital team that helps tackling COVID-19 situation in the most populous province in Indonesia, with a population that has a size even bigger than some countries in Europe, right? I don't believe that's easy. That's difficult. Do you recommend that all provinces should have set up their own system so they can harness their data to help their own government so they can respond to the crisis? I know that Indonesia, the level of crisis from one province to another province can be different. It's a big country because we don't know how long this pandemic is going to go on. I don't know. We expect it's going to be over once we find a vaccine. We hope that we can go back to normal life, within 1 or 2 years, but we don't know. So as long as we are in that mode, we have to just keep managing this, isn't it? We have to be in the mode of managing. So that's my question. Would you, as a practitioner yourself, would you urge or advise or recommend for all local governments, to seriously looking into this type of and developing, this system?
Exactly. I would 100%, if not 110% agree with you, because the problem with the national government not making a standardized system in itself would urge subnational government to make their own system. And when it comes to aggregating this data on national level, they are going to find a lot of problems, because even the data is collected. If the process of collecting this is not standardized, you're going to have a lot of problems synchronizing this data from one place to the other. I think the national government has done quite a good job in a way that they are trying to make this kind of sort of one app for everyone. So they came up with Bersama Lawan COVID, and then there is a Bersatu Lawan COVID, and then there is Peduli Lindungi, and then there is All Record, which turns into All New Record, which turns into All Record TC19. But again, we see if there is an uncoordinated effort from the higher ups, these subnational government are going to, strive in their own capacity. And of course, they are not going to communicate that well with their neighboring provinces. So we're really hoping that the leadership from the national level could help coordinate all these, differences. Because And we can take it not just within a country's sample, but also across countries, right? And for trade to happen, for traveling to freely open up again, you cannot really do that until all countries are free from COVID-19, right? That's the same case with West Java trying its best with system to manage the pandemic. But if the neighboring provinces are not doing the same, this battle is going to go over and over again. And I think it's the same issue that we have with climate crisis or inequality, everything else. It becomes a global coordinated effort.
So anyway, Biondi, thank you so much for educating me even more on this. This has always been one of my area of interest. Thank you for your service as well and your team's service for the people in West Java. I believe the governor is lucky to have you guys, you know, in his team. Stay healthy and take care.
Thank you. Likewise.